F1 is a different sport than it was 10 years ago, and there's no denying that. Back then in school, I was effectively known as the F1 kid, and none of my friends really had a clue what it was. In fact, it was generally pretty rare to bump into a young person with an extensive knowledge of the sport. This isn't the case today. The popularity of F1 has skyrocketed in the past few years, with the sport's social media presence going through the roof. There's a popular Netflix series, merchandise pretty much everywhere, and an entire new generation of fans who thirst over Lando Norris. It is safe to say that the sport is considerably more mainstream now than it was when I was growing up. This is a great thing, or at least you'd assume that it would be. As Liberty Media's pockets have got heavier, the core fan base of the sport has got smaller, since there is one crucial thing that the organisers have forgotten about: the racing. Sure, you can have a Netflix series with more manufactured drama than an episode of The Office, but what's racing without good racing? Perhaps I'm being overly dramatic, but there's no denying that the focus of an F1 race weekend is becoming centralized on celebrity drama and whoever's got the biggest penis. Think about Miami and Las Vegas, for instance. The media was more focused on what type of cologne David Beckham was wearing than actually worrying about how entertaining the race was. Yeah, I suppose these tracks are in great, prestigious locations, but look at the actual layout. It's absolute horseshit. The fact that we used to complain about Sochi is beyond me, given how uninspired these two new tracks are. And don't even get me started on the new Madrid street circuit. Liberty Media are trying way too hard to turn Formula 1 into a reality TV show, with Drive to Survive being an example of the sport's cheesy manufactured drama. The fact that Verstappen wants nothing to do with Netflix is a massive win amongst the core fans, since it goes to show that the fastest driver at the moment somewhat shares our frustrations. I have a crazy amount of respect for that. His wheel-to-wheel racing, not so much. The reason that this has worked so well for Liberty Media is because it allowed them to provide entertainment for people who hadn't been exposed to racing before, and generally the best way to intrigue people is with drama. Heck, my best performing videos here on YouTube are commonly ones where I give drivers flack. Think about my Tictum video, for instance. This has resulted in a chunk of new viewers who know more about Gunther Steiner's favourite expletives than the actual sport itself. So how has Formula 1 changed in the past decade? I'm going to begin way back in 2012, when HRT still existed and Maldonado somehow had a super license. 2012 is what I'd consider to be the last truly magnificent Formula 1 season. The first 7 races had 7 different winners, and the championship boiled right down to the last race, with a fantastic rivalry between Fernando Alonso and a younger Sebastian Vettel. In fact, I made an entire video on 2012 a couple of years ago, if you'd like to check that out after this one. The 2012 cars sounded gorgeous and looked gorgeous. Granted, some of them looked like they'd been sat on by Henry VIII, but when we were due for a period of noses that looked like this, it's very hard to complain. Each driver had access to DRS and a KERS battery that could be deployed each lap, which made the racing pretty good. Not to mention how much smaller the cars were then than they are now, making Monaco not boring. Well, actually, I think that was just because Perez kept forgetting about his left foot. 2013 wasn't too dissimilar, just lacked the championship battle that was present in 2012. 2014 saw one of the most bizarre regulation changes in Formula 1 history. The new V6 turbo hybrids sounded absolutely awful, and the majority of cars had a raging boner, except from Lotus, who were kind enough to dedicate a penis for both Grosjean and Maldonado. Okay, that might be the weirdest sentence that's ever come out of my mouth. Mercedes would also produce a car so efficient that they were practically in a different class to the rest of the field. Wait, why are Caterham even still here? And bloody hell, despite all this, the title fight between Hamilton and Rosberg remained exciting, and in general the racing wasn't at all bad. It just felt like it needed censorship. In 2015, most cars managed to quit their Viagra addiction, but Mercedes was still the team to beat. Again, the racing wasn't terrible, but overall a pretty average season. In 2016, Lewis Hamilton encountered every reliability issue possible, allowing Nico Rosberg to clinch the championship and flee the scene. Like your dad. I'm going to pass you guys over to Will from FP1 to discuss the 2017 regulation changes, because it's been a while since we worked together and I've genuinely had people requesting it. So over to Will.
2017 saw Formula 1 decide that the current generation of cars were rather ugly, the solution to this being to have them undergo a transformation not too dissimilar to what Jonah Hill went through in the early 2010s. The new cars were made longer and wider, with the most significant visual change occurring with the front and rear wings, which got 150 and 200mm longer respectively. The tyres went through a bulking routine as well, quite notably with the rear set, the aim being to bring the general shape of the cars back to those seen in what non-DTS fans would call the glory days. There was one rather large problem with this, however. Whilst yes, the cars arguably looked a lot nicer and appealed more to fans, they were now so wide and produced so much dirty air, decent racing was more or less impossible. The new machines were famously compared to boats during 2017 pre-season testing, with the season opening Australian Grand Prix seeing a grand total of 2 overtakes after the first lap. The problems were fairly clear for everyone to see. This was a rather extreme example, but by the end of the year the number of overtakes had fallen by nearly half compared to what we saw in 2016. The season practically saved by Stroll's poor qualifying efforts, allowing him to bump up the figures on a Sunday. Things really haven't changed much compared to nowadays, have they? The new regs also made the 2017 era of car a lot heavier in comparison to its 2016 predecessors, an upwards trend that has sadly continued to this day with the further introduction of devices like the Halo and the ground effect cars from 2022. Really though, this was just the beginning of the end for Formula 1, as January 23rd, 2017 would see the sport's ownership change hands, though I'll throw you back to Dylan for that one.
As Will mentioned, something else that occurred in 2017 was Liberty Media's acquisition of the sport, knocking Bernie Ecclestone off his porch. Good news at the time because it meant that the prospect of artificially dampening the tracks with sprinklers was no longer in the question. It was also announced later that year that Netflix was set to be creating a documentary-style series following the 2018 season, which was received pretty well. At least, in my opinion, it's the most bearable season of Drive to Survive. This garnered attention from non-F1 fans who were bored of tacky Netflix originals and wanted to watch something different for a change. This growth was great at the time, since it was great to see a different perspective of an F1 race weekend. The novelty of this wore off very quickly, however, when the producers began exaggerating drama or even completely manufacturing their own with out-of-context radio messages, most notably regarding Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. For some reason, they made out as if the McLaren teammates had petty drama by making it sound as if they were angered by one another. Anyone with a brain who actually watched the sport was confused by this, since it was one of the many examples of completely fake drama within the series. Then comes 2021, a genuinely exciting championship all round. Unfortunately though, the need for drama left an incredibly sour taste in the mouth of racing fans around the world. No matter who you support, as a fan of racing, the way that 2021 ended was unacceptable. To take matters into your own hands and change the rules before the final lap of the entire season is truly disgusting. And my very first thought was, this was done to make a more interesting story. I noticed that this began a proliferation of racing fans as those of us who wanted to watch more racing-orientated series found our new homes. For me, this was IndyCar. I had been slowly moving across, but this was certainly a turning point in my priorities, and I know many can say the same. The 2022 and 2023 Formula 1 seasons felt incredibly empty. There were obviously standout moments, but I was nowhere near as interested in the sport as I had been in the past decade. The media-based focus only got worse with the inclusion of Miami in 2022 and Vegas in 2023. The celebrities on the grid were so disrespectful to Martin Brundle during his grid walk in Miami that I didn't even bother watching the race. The community as a whole has just been ruined by fame and Liberty Media's undying desire to entertain those who aren't just entertained by racing. The quest for popularity began Formula 1's downfall, but achieving popularity is what put the nail in the coffin. It's incredibly hard to take F1 seriously in its current state as a true racing fan, but that's okay. Realistically, we will all still watch it, so Liberty Media wins. F1 is a household name, and in other news, David Beckham is wearing Ralph Lauren cologne. This video was a bit more of a rant. I hope you guys out there enjoyed it, and I know that many of you will agree with me. If you did enjoy this video, please remember to subscribe to the channel and go and check out FP1 Will stuff if you haven't already. Chances are you're already subscribed to him. Anyway, I will see you all in the next video, but until then, take care, and thank you very much for watching.